In this PowerPoint, we're going to describe how IQ is measured and outline some of the criticisms of the idea of IQ as intelligence. As a quick introduction, I'm going to just talk about cognitive ability. Cognitive ability makes one of the major areas of development in human growth, and for every stage of development, a commensurate level of intelligence is required to have been attained. In order to ascertain the cognitive capacity of an individual, an intelligence quotient (IQ) test is one of the traditional tests used. The intelligence quotient, or IQ, is a result of taking a series of standardized tests to gauge a person's problem-solving and reasoning skills. Fluid and crystallized intelligence are the two categories in which the IQ is often categorized. The ability to solve and reason coherently about new challenges is referred to as fluid intelligence. It is not dependent on the knowledge that has been learned. It is assessed by a non-verbal exam like the matrices test that calls for abstract thought. These assessments are made to lessen the impact of verbal understanding, educational attainment, and culture. Conversely, crystallized intelligence may be described as the capacity to employ experience, knowledge, and other relevant variables. This part of IQ is often measured via verbal and vocabulary tests. However, many scholars have alluded that there are various limitations of the IQ test. In this article, the concept of IQ test was examined, how IQ is measured, and also discussed the major criticisms that challenge the adoption of IQ as a measure of intelligence. IQ is measured by the aid of a unified test that probe into the different dimensions of cognitive capacity. Particularly, these tests attempt to measure the reasonability, memory recollection skills, ability to solve problems, and the hystelic intelligence of the person taking it with respect in their age group. In general, both vocabulary as well as verbal examination are used to measure intelligence. Examples of such tests include the Webster Adult Intelligence Scale, Binet Intelligence Test, Raven's Test, among others. IQ tests are often scaled ordinally. Typically, the Norman sample raw score is converted to a normal distribution with a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15 using rank order. Generally, a high IQ gets over 130, while any score that is lower than 70 is considered to be below average. Although IQ tests are commonly used to assess some types of intelligence, they may not be a valid indicator of more complex definition of human intelligence, such as innovation and social intelligence. Unlike quantities like pressure, internal inflammation that can be measured based on external observable features that has been theoretically proven and generally accepted, such theory does not exist for cognitive ability. Hence, a number of scholars have challenged the validity of IQ tests as a measurement of intelligence for various factors that will be examined in this section. So the first section out of two is the IQ test and complexity of verbal aspects. A person's proficiency on general verbal assessment that include definitions of words and vocabulary, similarities in illustrating the way two elements are identical, and comprehension in demonstrating typical cultural trends like the need for additional education for doctors, can be argued to be the most ambiguously indicate culturally acquired knowledge or processing as the true source of variance. Considering the Scots term canny, which means clever, as an example, it differs somewhat from the same word utilized in northeastern England, which means alright or okay. Children are absorbing equally complicated conceptual meanings in these various circumstances, yet one group would correctly answer the last test item, while the other would provide an inaccurate response. Once more, cognitive distance, rather than relative cognitive strength, is the primary source of variety in seeming complicated cognition. Therefore, as a result of this cultural bias, inaccurate evaluations may result from questions that are constructed in a way that prioritizes one cultural background over another, especially for people with diverse language or cultural origins. We are now going to look at the non-verbal aspects. In an attempt to avoid the problems associated with verbal items, non-verbal test elements were developed as typified in Raven's test, which is frequently regarded as the test of pure G. As an illustration, Figure 1 on my notes shows how a connection is induced across the rows and how it is reinforced down the rows. The missing ingredient can then be found using the conditioned covariation, occasionally calls for conditional reasoning. Among the possibilities provided, each item has a different set of covariations or rules, which can vary in complexity depending on the conditional depth or abstraction. Items changing, i.e., more items changing, nonlinearities in the conditioning. These nonverbal tests of general ability represent an effort on the part of the test developers to meet the need for a way to measure ability for diverse populations. By measuring ability using tests of general ability that do not involve verbal or quantitative content, the tests offer a specific methodology designed explicitly for assessing diverse populations. This is nonverbal tests of ability meet a particular need in the field that traditional multi-content tests like Welstra and Binet could not adequately address. Just as nonverbal tests of general ability have changed the field, the availability of cognitive processing-based measures of ability have also altered the landscape considerably. Based on the limitations of verbal aspects, the non-verbal aspect was developed to access diverse populations. This has also been criticized for not being inclusive of diverse groups of people such as with developmental delay and intellectual disabilities, autistic people, and young children amongst others. This leaves a small group of typically developing people. I'm now going to move on to IQ tests and job complexity. There is a diverse school of thoughts on the implications of IQ on job performance. For example, the proponents of Gottfriedson believe that there is a correlation between the type of IQ test score and job complexity depending on the job type. The argument is dependent on the bias that each job role requires different level of complexity of information processing. However, recent studies argue that there is a weak correlation between IQ test score and job performance. Naturally, neither the correlation nor the relationship between IQ and work performance that itself is stronger with increasing job complexity indicates that the real cause of this covariance is causal. As a result, IQ test requirements appear very simple when compared to almost all employment requirements, which raises the possibility that variations in test performance are caused by other factors. To conclude my slideshow, we have seen that IQ test has become the most popular means of measuring cognitive abilities. Basically, it tests reasoning, memory recollection, and problem-solving skills based on standard questions that test verbal and non-verbal intelligence complexity of the person taking the test. However, because of the cultural bias, complexity of the test itself, age sensitivity, among other factors, the validity of an IQ test is usually questioned. This article examined how IQ is measured and also probed into some of the limitations of measuring intelligence with standardized IQ tests. Thank you for listening. Here are some of the references I used to back up my statement.